Hello, everybody. Thank you for coming. My name is Dan Tryman, and I'm the CEO of New England Israel Business Council, and in short, NEIBC. NEIBC, it's a not-for-profit organization that its mission is to connect business-wise Israel and Massachusetts primarily, but also New England and the rest of the US. And we would like to strengthen the business relationship. We believe that by doing so, we'll have a better world. I would like to thank everybody for joining us, and of course the panelists, Omer, Dani, and Chagai, and the moderator, Tamir. Without further ado, I'll ask Tamir to take control and run the meeting. Tamir, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you very much. So when Dan talked to me, asking me to moderate this panel, I was very happy because I think the triangle between the market of smart mobility, the impact on safety and the Israel community is very attractive one. From my point of view, this is the biggest transformation of the next decade. I know that there are few people here or several people coming from Massachusetts, from Boston. So I would say on top of health and medical, I think the most exciting industry today is the transportation industry. And on top, moving to autonomous driving, connectivity, digitization, electrification, all of those keywords, making lots of Israeli companies, startup companies, busy innovating and taking the front seat, I would say, of this industry today. The shakeout of the industry is still ahead of us, and lots of investors are looking today into the space of mobility. They are visiting Israel. Lots of companies, automotive companies, OEM, tier 1, tier 2 companies, also looking at this space. They're opening and developing a research and development center in Israel. The impact on talent, war for talent, is significant high, and this is one of the problems we need to deal with. Today, in the smart mobility industry in Israel, there are more than 600. This is at least the statistics that I got this morning. More than 600 companies working at the space of mobility. Some of them are developing product and solution inside the vehicle. Some of them are on the cloud backend side, working on connectivity and content services. And lots of companies are working overall on mobility services, electrification, digitization, cloud, to recreate this revolution of smart mobility and smart transportation. When we say smart mobility, is no longer companies which are manufacturing cars. We are talking here about a car or a vehicle as an endpoint device. And most of the transition are happening today around the content, data-centric, customer-centric, and lots of things are happening in this industry. Choosing 3 companies out of 600 companies is not an easy task, but I think the criteria of selecting the panelists today, Omer, the co-founder and CEO of Innoviz, Chagai, the CEO of Autotalks, and Dani, the co-founder and CEO of Kotanga, has not been done by chance. I think the main reason of choosing these companies are because they are proceeding quickly and fast into being a success story, being funded, having a customer base, working already with proven technologies. So I think hearing the 3 panelists will have lots of insights about what does it take to kick off, to initiate, but also to achieve some level of success, both on the financial side and the technical side. Later on, we can also talk in general beyond each one of the companies about what does it mean to work with the traditional incumbent here in the automotive industry, which is definitely not an easy task. clash of mentalities and culture between the Israeli speed and the automotive traditional company scale and legacy mindset and culture. So we can talk about it also later. Out of the 600 companies, if you go to the Israeli Innovation Center, you can see that 2021 was also the year of the unicorn. Lots of companies valuated above billion, and there are lots of competition. Only in the last 5 months, we had 5 Israeli automotive companies go through a process of being public, either through SPAC or any other mechanism. Among them is Innoviz, so Omer can also talk about it a bit today. So this is really a market which is very, very hot, I would say, in Israel. And here today, we can hear 3 stories actually that can complement each other. The market of LiDARs, which Omer is leading, will create eventually lots of skills and capabilities in moving to autonomous driving. V2x, which is also a complementary technology. Hagai will present some use cases here, so you can have some knowledge about how V2x is evolving and developing. And last but not least, we have Danny, which will present shift to the cloud and the idea of simulating scenarios on autonomous driving. Endless amount of scenarios. Some of them has ethical impact. Some of them has kind of a complex algorithm of decision making. So what does it mean to build simulation for autonomous driving and how we can learn from it? So I hope that all of us will have an engaging evening, and you are most welcome to ask questions, the panelists, and later on we can also open up to general questions. I welcome everyone to use the chat. Here, if you have any questions, you can type them, and perhaps we consolidate some of the questions and ask the panelists to answer them. Last but not least, I will say that I'm also co-founded a company called Cymotive. We are not going to describe Cymotive technology today, but talking about safety and security and trust. Cymotive headquartered in Israel consists of 150 cybersecurity experts, providing today lots of solutions and services to big automotive companies in Tier 1, helping them to protect themselves against cyber attacks. And this is also part of delivering safe and trust to the new customers of the smart mobility industry. So I like to just to structure the panel, to give each one of the panelists around between 10 and 15 minutes, and ask you, Omer, Hagai, and Danny, first of all, briefly to describe the company, what is it that you do, the business operating model. And then we can also welcome some questions for each one of you. And as we have time also at the end, we can also open up a discussion or dialogue about the whole industry.
Oh, yeah.
So I suggest to open with you can put yourself on mute. This will be good. Then we can hear everyone. Let me see. Guys, if you can just put yourself on mute. Thank you very much. So, Omer, I would like to start with you. We know that Innoviz had an impressive SPAC just in the last couple of months. Company which is developing hardware and software in the field of LiDAR. And I welcome you to present the company, and if it's possible, during your presentation, if you can refer also to the model of SPAC, why SPAC was good for you to build up a company that can scale up, what is the opportunities, and shortly how you did it. And secondly, out of the 600 companies in Israel, there are lots of companies providing LiDAR solutions. So if you can also tell us what does it take to win the LiDAR war, and what Innoviz is doing differently in order to win the competition.
Sure. I hope I have 2 hours. I'm kidding. So hi, everyone. I'm Omer Kilaf. CEO and co-founder of Innoviz. So I want to share my screen so I can present maybe a few slides. I think it will be easier to convey some of the messages. So let me just tell me if you see it in the full screen right now.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, good. Okay, so in a very high level, Innoviz is developing a LiDAR. This is Innoviz One. That's the product that we are currently producing in several sites. We have a site in Germany, and we have a high volume site for automotive in the US with our partner Magna, which is a tier 1. We are also working on our next generation Innoviz 2, which is a significantly higher performance and lower cost. It's 30 times better than Innoviz 1 and 70% cost reduced versus the Innoviz 1, which allows us to be very competitive today on several programs. You can see the image on the right. I'll show you more videos so you'll get an impression of the product. Today, Innoviz is roughly 300 and I think even beyond 370 people. We're a very multidisciplinary company. We are developing everything from the single component. We developed 3 main chips. It's the detector, it's the ASIC, and it's the MEMS scanner. And those are 3 components that allow us to provide a very high performance at a very low cost. I think the main differentiator between us and the other LiDAR companies is that we are on the 905 nanometer camp. I mean, the LiDAR space is mostly split between the companies that are using 905 nanometer versus 1550. It is considered to be significantly more difficult to achieve high performance using 905, but 905 allows to use a very low cost design. So and I would say the gap in cost is very dramatic, of course, in automotive. And we were able to break through that limitation of 905 by developing the different components of our system. And that's what allowed us to win several programs today in the market. We have a design win with BMW for series production for level 3. And we have a design win with another customer, which we didn't disclose its name, for a shuttle program. It's L4. Currently, we're competing on several programs for L2 and L3 with Innoviz 2, which is the coming product. About the SPAC, so we went public 6 months ago. We did that through a SPAC, which allowed us to raise substantial capital. We raised around $370 million, which allows us today to run fast and basically secure a lot of business. So that amount of money is very helpful for a company located in Israel. As you might know, usually in Israel, companies in the stage that we are usually sell their company to a bigger company. And now going through the SPAC, it allowed us to continue our journey, grow the team, and be more robust in terms of financially, of course. Now, it's very meaningful when you're competing on programs in the auto space. When a customer wants to choose a certain technology, they want to make sure that the new supplier is going to be around in the next 10 years. Is of course showing them a very solid bank account is very important. Let me show you a few videos. Of course, maybe I'll just touch this. So a LiDAR in general, it's a sensor that provides you a 3D video. It provides redundancy to cameras and radars. We're not only developing the sensor itself, we're also developing the computer vision, the perception layer, which translates the 3D data into object detection and classification. And basically, the RFQs or the requirements that we get from car makers, it's basically a duplicate of what cameras are supposed to do. Because when a camera is able to detect a person at, let's say, 200 meters, the car cannot rely on it unless it can get the same performance from a LiDAR, because there should be always redundancy to cameras, and therefore the need for very high resolution, long range, but also the perception level is very critical. I'll show you a few videos just to maybe reflect the importance of LiDAR. So of course, when a camera is totally blind by direct sun, it doesn't matter how strong your processing power is or how much annotation you've made. In this situation, you're completely blind. Of course, it's also low light condition that makes cameras become to suffer from degradation. And those are just two cases out of others, such as blurring of the camera due to a drop of water, which requires the car to have another type of sensor that is not sensitive to these situations. I'll show you just, this is a live stream of our LiDAR, sorry, in driving in the middle of the day. You can see the fine point cloud that is coming from a single device mounted on the grille of the car. And this is a live stream of our data coming without post-processing, etc. I mentioned that we are also developing the computer vision, object detection and classification. And I'll show you, this is actually a simulation we used from a company called Cognata that you will hear about soon. So this is a simulation of InnoVis2. So as you can see, we are using the Cognata tool in order to simulate our next generation sensor. It allows us already to develop our computer vision. It accelerates our process and of course improves the robustness of the software. In parallel, we are using annotation. We have people that are collecting data. We have a fleet of cars that are traveling in different states, and we use that data collection to do annotation. Some of the annotations are also done automatically or at least semi-automatically. And this allows us to increase our catalog size, which obviously improves our computer vision. That's in a nutshell, and I'm happy to answer any questions later on.
All right, so we will get back to you later on with a few questions, and to the panelists, thank you for the presentation. Let's move now to Chagai, to Autotalks. Autotalks, I'm personally very excited for Autotalks technology because we're all talking about the car itself and the vehicle, but Autotalks is assuming that the car is not acting and behaving for itself. It's part of a bigger ecosystem, and there are lots of objects around the car that should and can communicate with the car itself to provide better visibility into the surrounding. The topic of V2x is all about vehicle to everything. Lots of objects are around the vehicle, and if we build a good communication and a good interface between the vehicle itself and the object, we can get 360 degrees data from many objects. And what Chagai and Autotalk is doing is to provide a complementary project to the LiDAR technology in order to avoid dangerous situation to the vehicle. So Chagai, I would like to hand the session to you. If you can tell us, perhaps using some use cases, what V2x is and why V2x can be on top of existing sensor and LiDAR solutions. And perhaps second issue, if you can also move, because we all speak about vehicles, the four-wheeler machines, but today we see lots of micro-mobility solutions, e-bikes, e-scooters, two-wheeler solutions. If you go to Rothschild Boulevard in Tel Aviv, you see e-scooters are crashing with each other. And there are lots of fatal accidents and fatalities today because of two-wheeler not driving safe. And I wonder if V2X can also solve two-wheeler solutions, a solution for two-wheeler accident. And if yes, if you can give us some example and use cases. Please, Chagai.
Thank you, Tamir. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Chagai. I'm the CEO of AutoTalks. I'll try to explain how this all fits in a different scale. There are sensors inside the vehicle, and let's look at how it all connects in a networking or in a networked environment. And I think that is something that is still not out there and will be interesting to share all those new use cases. So pleasure to be here. Let's share my screen. Okay. So AutoTalks name speaks for itself. We call it the confidence of knowing ahead. Why? Because there's no better way to understand what's happening beyond the corner or around the corner or across a hill than to exchange information. And we, as human beings, we exchange information with each other. So first of all, a personal thing from my past, in my army times, I was almost killed in an accident when I was going up north. We entered an intersection, and I'm still remembering the sight of looking to the side. There was a bus that was not visible enough, and the next thing we were rolling inside a ditch at the side of the road. Luckily, nothing severe happened, but it was a second here or there, and I would not be speaking here. And that led me to, when I first met the co-founder of AutoTalks, to say, how come we cannot understand what's happening beyond the corner, or what we call not within our line of sight. So let's look at a brief video. Do you hear the voice?
No.
Of the video? So 1 second, let me share again. Sorry. Yeah, okay.
V2X,
Now?
Vehicle to
Yes.
Everything Communication, will soon have a major impact on everyone's life. It's the safety network of all road users. It'll remove uncertainties that come with using the roads today. With V2X, vehicles share their position, speed, heading, and acceleration. V2X complements the information coming from other vehicle sensors like cameras, LiDARs, or radars and acts upon it. It's a non-line-of-sight sensor that allows drivers to know the location and expected path of all road users. It'll prevent accidents, which no other sensor can prevent. In addition, it'll improve mobility by creating smoother traffic flow. For this reason, the Global New Car Assessment Program, known as NCAP, are adding V2X to their scoring. AutoTalks, a fabless semiconductor company founded in 2008, has been the pioneer and leader of V2X technology since its inception and continues to spearhead the market. AutoTalks is a technological leader and innovator. It offers the only global solution and the highest level security. With powerful execution and visionary strategy, AutoTalks is poised to capture market share across V2X mobility verticals and more. Take the driver's seat. The V2X revolution is just beginning. In the next few years, V2X will be part of all new vehicles. Two-wheelers and other vulnerable road users will reap the greatest benefit from this life-saving technology. And since this sensor is very affordable and easy to install, the aftermarket can add older vehicles to the V2X safety network. There's nothing more precious than human life. We're here to...
Okay, so I think we well understood that V2X is all about creating the networking effect of enabling all road users to directly communicate between each other. And road users are not just vehicles, two-wheelers, e-bikes, e-scooters, in the future pedestrians. So we provide chipsets or solutions along with software that address multiple applications, vehicles, two-wheelers, heavy machinery, even other verticals. And in the future, this will integrate into smartphones, smartwatches, and create an environment where all road users can collaborate and communicate between each other. And again, I'll show the use cases now, how this further improves or dramatically improves road safety. Let's look at the road fatalities over the last maybe 30, 40 years. So we've seen a dramatic decline over since 1970 to 2010. And even though we introduced radars and cameras and in the future LiDARs like Omar is describing, there is a limit to the improvement that we are doing, and there is an increase now. Why? Mainly because of distracted driving. Distracted driving is causing a huge amount of increase in fatalities, and we believe there has to be a paradigm shift. So in today's environment, we drive alone. Each car is isolated. We are unable to exchange information with others, and that is essentially limit us to in some of the use cases that I'm going to show shortly. And we believe that V2X is now going to be part of every car in the future, allowing us to network together and exchange information. So what V2X is all about, let's look at some of the key use cases. So first, it's V2 everything, right? So it's vehicles, it's motorcycles, micromobility, e-scooters, e-bikes, etc. Of course, pedestrians in the future. And essentially, I like this example of an intersection where we typically conflict with each other. People are not obeying stoplights or red lights, and the more severe accidents happen in intersections. So in this case, first of all, the big benefit of V2X is non-line of sight. I don't need to see the other object to avoid collisions. I exchange information with other users of the road. And in this process, I understand and can map everyone that is around me, and not necessarily I see them. So somebody coming across a corner and not obeying a red light, I would stop before entering the intersection. At the bottom, if somebody has an emergency braking and somebody in front or in the middle didn't stop, I don't see the brake light, I'm not reacting. I would get this emergency warning or braking from the car 10 cars ahead of me, and I slow down. Again, essentially eliminating those surprises. And surprises are what typically cause the most severe accident. And the more advanced use case is perception sharing. So in this case, a mom with a stroller crossing a road, the blue car sees it with a camera or a LiDAR, and then can share this information with other vehicles. So essentially, we create the networking effect of safety and perception. Now we collaborate with other vehicles that might have more advanced sensors. So maybe a new car has a LiDAR and an older car has nothing. And the new car sees much better than the older car, and still it can share this warning or perception with other vehicles. This is what we call day-to application. And of course, interaction is also with two-wheelers. I'm able to see two-wheelers, which might be my blind spot. And no matter how much perception and sensors I have inside the car, they don't typically cover all angles and all use cases. Again, the non-line of sight nature is allowing us to communicate with all those objects on the road. Just to highlight, V2X is a direct peer-to-peer connectivity aimed for real-time, reliable, low latency, automotive-grade solutions, which means I communicate without the presence of a network. There can be a network, and cars are connected to the cloud, but we don't replace that. There might be a 4G, a 3G, or no G communication. And of course, when we communicate and interact directly, we can now exchange this information in a safe manner and can warn each other of each other's action and actually share perception. So V2X sits side by side alongside the V2N. Some of the various use cases, so starting with driver awareness, of course, the ability to avoid collisions in intersections where there's no line of sight. And there are so many examples where we walk or drive into an intersection and we are unaware of somebody who's going to violate a red light or a stoplight, or just accidentally miss something, and we are conflicting, and then there is no more room to react. So we can stop ahead of time. Cooperative perception, the way that we can share sensors with other vehicles. So in this example we've seen before, the car stops at the crossroad, sees pedestrian cross it with a camera or a radar or a LiDAR, and shares this information with the rest of the vehicles, warning them about potential hazards that are not still able to see, creating this environment of network safety. And in the future, coordinated maneuvering, right? We can now do many things now. To start, let me have a way to go out the highway, or I want to enter the highway, or I want to merge or zip together two lanes without creating congestions or traffic jams. All of that will be possible by allowing us to seamlessly communicate with each other. Again, the communication is done on the car level. It's not involving any interaction from the driver itself, and we can potentially even do groups that when we approach into an intersection, we can coordinate the access to the intersection and avoid any stop in an intersection, and even coordinate this with the traffic lights. So there's very advanced use cases here. Let's look at the, Tamir mentioned the whole two-wheeler. Let me show how a biker sees what happens in a city. So addressing what Tamir mentioned, V2X is not just about vehicles, it's about us interacting with two-wheelers. I think you mentioned Tamir Tel Aviv, but everywhere around Europe, or now starting also in many other places around the globe, you see many two-wheelers. Either there are e-bikes with a whole revolution about people even driving with kids at the front. So it becomes an object or a device or a way to transport people, not just ourselves. It could be our kids at the front. And we want to have safety. The problem is that we aren't able to put any advanced safety on those on those objects, and we need to help them be visible. And it's not possible to be visible only by cameras or line of sight sensors, because these objects come typically from behind. They zigzag, they have a blind spot, we need to detect them. The only way to do that is to communicate with them. And it's a very simple way to protect or actively protect bikers in a city, or even when they're driving outside the city, and actually not hurt them. Just briefly on the regulation side, so we mentioned also in the beginning, NCAP, the new car assessment program, which is the big driver force around safety, is putting V2X in its scoring as early as 2025, and this is a huge driving force to introduce now V2X technology into every vehicle. There are already production programs that we are involved in, around 5 active SOPs, start of productions, and this is driven by this Regulation Act, which is the holy grail of safety for vehicles. That's how ABS was introduced, airbags, seatbelts were all driven by this safety score. Nobody wants to buy a non-safe or low scored car. Most cars are 4 or 5 star rated, and V2X is going to be part of this rating. And last, maybe I would kind of summarize what I wanted to kind of take a main takeaway. It's really a paradigm shift in how you see transportation, from individual safety to what we call collaborative network safety. And I urge you to think of the analogy of mobile, that back in the 90s or early 2000, there were no smartphones, there was only text, and 3G just came. And then in 2008, 2009, iPhones, and then smartphones, which essentially changed the world and put internet and data and social in our pockets. The same phenomena or the same paradigm shift will lead to this disruption also in the mobility space, where we can start interacting with each other and creating so much value and use cases that probably we don't see all of it. And that is why it's such a big change in how mobility will behave in the future.
Great, Hagai. Thank you very much. This is really a significant topic. Everything is connecting with everything. I suggest both Hagai and Omer, if you can take a look at the chat, there are a few questions for you. You can also type your answers. But I would like, before handing it over to Danny, perhaps to take one question which is relevant both to Omer and to Hagai, regarding securing your product. Those innovation are tempting target also for malicious activities to manipulate and to change them. So what do you do, both Omer and Hagai, in order to provide trust that your system is working properly and you protect it against possible manipulations?
Okay, I'll start. So I assume that what you're referring to is to anyone who is trying to let's start from trying to intervene with the software, etc. So you should be. We're under the assumption that we are within the car network, and we are fulfilling the car maker cybersecurity requirements, but we are behind its firewall. So we of course, when we are doing any over-the-air update, we are following a certain procedure in order to make sure that no firmware upgrade is done in the wrong way. In regards to any manipulations that is done externally, such as trying to blind the sensor or trying to use a laser spot to kind of try to blind it. So that actually is something that we have a solution for in different layers. So if anyone would try to point a laser into the LiDAR, it will only cause a burning of a single pixel within the frame, and we will be able to even detect it. So that's not something that we are concerned about. Of course, when you are in a car and there are multiple cars around you with multiple LiDARs, and someone asked what is a LiDAR, so maybe I would just say that. A LiDAR is a light radar. Basically, it's a laser scanner which emits pulses of light around the vehicle and measures the time that it takes for the light to travel back and forth. And by measuring the time, you can actually you can calculate the distance. And by doing that pixel by pixel, you get a 3D model of the environment. And this gives the car a very good understanding of everything around it. So obviously, when you have a laser scanner like that, and you're assuming that there are going to be millions of LiDARs, of Innoviz LiDARs in the field, you need to assume that that will not interfere to each other. So obviously, we need to take care of that. I hope I answered the question.
Yeah, great. Hagai, I suggest you can type your answer just because we are running out of time. And also some people are asking about, Hagai, how your company has been funded. So if you want to inject some money, this is your chance to ask people to contribute.
I won't
some
take
money
everybody else's time, and I want to let Danny present as well. So if they want to approach me, I guess Dan can do that directly. But just briefly, we are in a different, just correlates to what Tamir mentioned, securing the whole network and malicious or people that are trying to fool you. So yeah, V2x needs a holistic approach to cybersecurity, and it's a very deep subject, but I need to trust each other messages. So if you tell me something, I need to, there has to be a root of trust established in a very fast manner. And I will not go into the details, but it's dealt underneath the hood of the whole V2x ecosystem. And it's much more deeper than that.
Great. Okay, so I would like now to hand it over to Danny, the co-founder and CEO of Cognata. And Danny, you are last but not least, not by mistake, because I think the topic of simulation using the cloud is very important, because we are facing today so many scenarios and options for autonomous vehicles, and so many companies are presenting technologies. And the question of testing, integration, simulation, visualization is really, really important. So your company is kind of an umbrella to everything we do. So I like you to present the company, the offering, and tell us a bit about moving to the cloud and why simulation is important today.
Sure, I will happen more. And my last company was in the advanced driver assistant space. It was acquired by the T1 Harman, and I ran their ADAS business unit. And I came, out of like creating solution to solve issues that I saw when I was deploying driver assistance solutions 5-6 years ago to all the big OEMs. So I'll start with presenting my company with a few slides. So we are Cognata, we're simulating autonomy, both for advanced driver assistance and also for autonomous vehicles. Autonomous vehicles, as you know, are like a little bit late, but there's a lot of applications which are reaching now to the market, like agriculture, construction and mining, defense alike, and so we're seeing like the deployment is happening, but in a little bit of like a later stages, and advanced driver assistance are all around. A little bit about my company, founded like 5.5 years ago. We are now around 70 employees. We raised $23 million. We have 3 out of the 7 top tier ones as our customers, and we are a tier 2 company, and we won a lot of like industry awards. Now I'll talk about the problem that we're seeing in the industry. Like simply to say, this is a problem of scale. Testing driver assistance functions, not to say autonomous, is a huge deal. Driving assistance functions that you have today, level 1 and level 2, is 70% of like already in the industry, like in new vehicles. We're talking about at least 1 million kilometers of validation. final. And we're going to level 4 and 5, you need to test it for 11 billion kilometers. This is like huge numbers, impossible to do on a few workstation in your office, and you need for that cloud computing together. So in a simple explanation, what is simulation? When you're creating a simulation, you're actually building a world. And the way to build a world is to do it with layers. We start from the left. In the static layer, we're building the world. We're building all the real estate, the things that doesn't move, the roads, the buildings, the vegetation, etc. On the dynamic layer, we're adding the virtual agents, the vehicles, the pedestrians, everything that moves, and we make it geolocal, meaning we build Paris, we add traffic of Paris. So you'll feel like you are driving in that location. The third part is about the sensing. So for autonomous vehicles or ADAS systems, you need a lot of different sensors, cameras, lidars, like Innoviz, and radars, V2x systems, GPS and IMU, and we're making what we call the digital twin of those sensors in our simulation. So you can reduce the amount of driving that you need to do and the amount of annotations. And the last but not least, which is the most important, is the cloud layer. When we're going into modern software development, you need a cloud solution, because driving those from millions to billions, you need some orchestration around it, and you need big data analytics to make some sense out of your system. And we're working with most of the public cloud today. So how it all works together. So this is a video that we created with Innoviz. We start with, this is like the Munich A8, like it's the Autobahn A8 in Germany. We add on that and our natural driving of all these vehicles, and on top of it, the Innoviz LiDAR, fully simulated, and we get this fusion. Just replay it. So all the layers are playing nicely together, from the static to the dynamic to the sensor. You get a full simulation, actual world, and you can utilize this data with all the ground truth to train and test your systems. And now, I think, Tamir, you talked beforehand about edge cases, so we created something exactly for that. So the most classical for people in Tel Aviv is like scooters around the street. So I'll show you with that specific video an edge case like that. There will be a cyclist from the right and a scooter from the left in a dark environment in Paris. And this is like, for creating this experiment in real life, it's almost impossible. As you know, it will risk actual lives. And with simulation, I can create it, add tons of permutations.
In Tel Aviv, it's quite easy to have this.
Yeah. People are risking their life easily. But at the end of the day, if you want to create this test set and get to an actual generalized solution, you need a simulation platform to test it over and over with different angles and different speeds and different light conditions, different traffic. And this is how you generalize your solution.
By the way, I can add something here, Danny. Sometimes when we are working with a certain car maker, and the discussion is actually very much about specific scenes that they want to understand how our LiDAR would be able to react to it. And we can actually stage that scene through this platform and basically show them exactly how fast we will be able to react. We can run it through our computer vision, our perception layer, and gives the accuracy and of course the reaction time, etc.
Fully with you, Omer. By the way, with the LiDAR, it would be much easier. like not to mention, this is like hardly being noticed for vision. And this is, I took this video from the sensor and I changed a little bit the contrast so we will be able to see those scooters. Really, really tough. And I'm sure, you know, getting Innovis 1 or Innovis 2 with modern vehicles, I think this is something that we should see soon, because it can solve that. And like, I'm not sure that, you know, with current capabilities of computer vision, which are camera only based, I'm not sure that this kind of scenario can be detected or solved, or it will be detected in the last minute. I'm not sure that the accident would be solved. And the last thing before I finish, we created a simulation platform which is easy to use. It's web-based. You can create a permutation really easily. There's like Python API, so you can create thousands of permutations with a few clicks, and they get only the failures that you get and not create like full regressions over your software stack with us. That's it. I will leave, you know, some times for all of us to have discussions, you know, for the last 10 minutes. So thank you all.
Great. So thank you for the panelists. And again, keep in mind that we're here hearing 3 out of 600 companies operating in this field. This is really powerful. I'm sure that over time, some of the company will disappear. But the idea of Israel driving the front seat of the car today, allowing this digitization to be happen, this is a very exciting moment, I would say, for the Israeli high-tech industry. I like to take 2 or 3 questions here and ask the panelists if you can answer. So the first one, it's also my concern. We are all leading companies. We have here CEOs and founders. And we know that the Israeli startup community is fast, agile, quick, nimble. And our customer, the OEM companies, the tier 1, I'm not talking about Google or Tesla. I'm talking about those incumbent traditional firm established 100 years ago. Omer, you mentioned BMW. I'm sure that also others are working with OEM. So how you deal with, I would say, this gap between the mentality of Israeli small startup, which like to run fast, and between this monolithic, vertical, traditional culture of OEM and tier 1? If you can give us some cases, or perhaps tell us what should be key success factors to deal effectively with this paradox. Omer, perhaps you can.
Sure. I think that first of all, like any industry, it's very important to identify the early adopters of this industry. So not all car makers are actually able to adopt a new technology and know how to work with startups. I think in the automotive industry, it's traditionally the premium car makers are those that are more technical and usually adopt technologies before others. I'm referring mostly to the German car companies. Those are the BMW, Daimler, and Audi. And I think that this is their niche. I mean, this is, I would say, this is how they lead in this market, and they are structured differently than other car makers, because that allows them to manage risks. When you are operating and collaborating with new technologies, you obviously need to manage it, and it's very different than trying to source something which is already on the shelf and just integrate it into the car. So I think I was a bit surprised to see very strong counterparts on with these car makers that you think about them as car makers, but eventually the sourcing team in these companies are very professional, and they know how to manage risks, and they know how to collaborate with you. Of course, the challenge is the next stage, when you want to collaborate with I would say, the most premium car companies. They don't want to manage risk. They only, want something which is cheaper, etc. At that stage, you need to already gain sufficient experience and knowledge so they can feel comfortable with it. And but you have the time to do that. Of course, I'll
Right,
let
Omer.
Hagai talk about the tier one's role, etc. But just that's my kind of tip.
Yeah, thank you, Hagai. Perhaps you can take another question here. We have lots of people now in New England, and winter is coming. Winter is tough in New England, and we have some questions about extreme weather, how those systems can operate in extreme weather, and what is the liability that companies are providing, and perhaps who is liable. If there is a problem here, who will get responsible for the problem? Is it the OEM or the supplier itself?
Sure. So first, I will address what we are doing. So communication is not affected, or almost not affected, by weather. It's one of the key benefits. We don't care about snow, rain, fog, the same way we don't care when we communicate over a smartphone. It uses radio frequencies to communicate and reaches a range of up to a mile and a half easily in open roads. So there's no weather issues. Actually, it can complement other sensors that might have difficulties in cases A, B, or C. So that's the benefit of communicating. So weather is not an issue. And on the other side, maybe worth mentioning, especially in heavy winter conditions in the East Coast, there is black ice. There is dangers on roads that sometimes are detected by front cars, but not by you. So actually somebody in the front is in an emergency situation, but you are going to enter the same one in 10 seconds and you don't see them. So we have all those horrific chain accidents with 20, 30, 40, 50 cars, and you can never avoid them. Again, V2x can communicate in advance and you stop at the side. That's one. And about the whole liability, and of course we work via tier ones, and there needs to be so the OEM is taking liability, the tier one is taking liability, and of course we take our own liabilities on quality levels. And I was addressing that as part of my answer to how you enter this segment. You need to be very patient, and yeah, you have to have that, I would say, the guts to actually stand behind what you're supplying and the quality levels to actually put it inside a car and to be able to be liable to stop the car or even participate in such a life-saving decision. It's not easy. So the quality levels by themselves are demanded through the whole supply chain, from the OEM to the tier, and then cascaded down to us as a chip supplier as well. So that is in high level.
Yeah. Great, Hagai. So eventually autonomous driving will also arrive to Boston over time. Fog will not stop us from providing solution to New England. Danny, I want to challenge you with a question. Since you are a serial entrepreneur and you already sold company to Harman, right? Is what Harman?
Yeah.
That later on acquired by Samsung. We see today two business models in Israel. One of them, I think Omer was mentioning, the idea of moving from a startup to scale up and getting budget and funding that allow the company to grow up before early acquired by someone else. Can you share with us some, I would say, advantages or disadvantages about, I would say, companies today are getting big, getting funding. They don't want to be acquired early on. They want to grow up before they will be acquired by someone. Since you did already one exit to Harman, how do you see those models, and which one will be preferred for the Israeli innovation community?
You know, like there's like pros and cons to each. The pros of being acquired was that, I learned a lot. I don't think that anything in Israel prepared me into getting to Harman, and I sold to BMW and to Daimler and GM and Toyota and Geely, like all the possible companies of the world, and learn how to manage very big processes. I think except the army or some defense industry in Israel, you don't see anything like it with that scale. So for me, it was a big school. Now going, the cons of being acquired is you're becoming you're losing your independence. So as an entrepreneur, if you can like IPO, no, go ahead and do it. Like it's the hard way, by the way. I'm sure that Omer like having a lot of his chest now with like, you know, quarterly reports. But for Israelis entrepreneurs being acquired, I wouldn't call it a preferred way. I think like we are losing our independence, and although that it's a huge risk, like, you know, to try to be big and like, you know, go for that. For my experience, if I had like the chance, like, you know, looking like 8 years before, I would not sell the company.
Yeah. That's great. Thanks a lot. So we have like 5 minutes. If someone would like to ask any questions, you are welcome to open up your microphone and ask us questions.
I have a question.
Yes, Shlomo, please.
So this is, of course, the next wave of automotive, and it's very interesting, and it's superb. The big question which I'm struggling with is, you have, as you said, 600 companies now involved in this area, whatever the number is, globally, etc. Each company does their own thing. They have their own software, their own sensors, etc., etc. When you have so many automobile suppliers and software suppliers and sensor suppliers, when you're talking about self-driving cars, etc., etc., you need to have some compatibility between all the sensing and the software, the detection, etc., etc. How, with so many companies involved in this area, how do you create a uniform platform that each car understands, or can read each car, if you want to use this word? So it's really not, so that you don't get a conflict between various platforms or various packages that various car companies are going to be using.
I would like to answer, Shlomo. Like that's exactly where, you know, my company comes to play. We're working with more than 20 companies already, most of like the Israeli cluster, and no, like simulating ahead of time, which is like, you know, I know like percentage of like the cost, enables you to integrate whatever combination that you like ahead of time and get the things up and running without even having a vehicle, without having the sensors even working. That's the power of simulation. I think like it's becoming like a major force now for the industry, specifically when we're talking about such a complex system as an autonomous driving system.
Can I add just briefly my humble point of view? That's why you tell each other what you are planning to do. I mean, when everything is connected, then you even if you do something which is not expected by the other side, I know your intentions. Just give an example. When you start steering the wheel of a car, it takes time for the cameras or for the lidars to detect that you are steering away. But well before you did that, you started to turn the wheel. So the car even measures the tilt of the vehicle and knows the angle of the wheel and can calculate where you are going. These are the benefits when you start the networking effect. Of course, until you have that, everybody has to join this ecosystem. But once it's in place, it's a perfect solution to understand what others are doing and to coordinate. Of course, a protocol here.
If I can have,
who's defining the ecosystem? Because the ecosystem is very critical. And in order to get a uniformity, you have to have some definitions.
Yeah, so I can address to what I'm doing, Tomer, to discuss further. But in our ecosystem, it's a standardized global standard, which is handled by the leading wireless standards, and it's defined the vocabulary and what you share, how you share it. Okay, but this is the way to share information between cars, and it's standardized.
well, but my answer is actually, you know, coming from a different direction. You know, if you look at the different ADAS solutions of today, they are usually converged around a few suppliers. And if you talk about, for example, airbags, and that's found in every car today, there are mainly two suppliers. No, it's not an endless number of suppliers, because when it comes to functional safety, the level of testing and qualification that you need to go through is very difficult. And eventually, car makers do prefer to converge around 2 or 3 types of suppliers. Otherwise, it will be very, very difficult, and volume will not allow the cost reduction, etc. Traditionally, again, those solutions that goes into functional safety and go through the very long due diligence and testing are selected by the German car companies, because they are usually managing those processes, and the others just leverage on maturity and volume. So I would say that that's the tendency or the dynamics that usually allows the market to converge around a few.
Yeah, I like to add, Shlomo, I think your question is a very legit and relevant one. But when we look back into the history of innovation and disruptive technologies, it's a matter of maturity. I believe that in this evolving market, technology will move faster than regulation and standardization. But over time, I think regulation and standardization will keep up the pace. You see always the technology is faster than institutions. First of all, you see lots of gadget, and then companies are dealing with problem of integration, standardization. So I think now we are in kind of a hype, and I'm sure that 1 or 2 years from now, we will put much more attention and time and effort into the cohesive, the integration of all of those solutions into one platform. This is how technology is behaving over time, and this is part of the hype we're now facing. Dan, I want to hand it over to you, because you have been the champion of this evening. If you have any questions or would like to wrap up the session, please, the stage is yours.
Well, I have tons of questions, but the time is running out. But just to remind everybody that if we look to all the industries, technology industries, everybody behave like the PC industry. If you remember the PC when it started in the 80s, it was a mess, no standards, very many producers and operating systems, and see where we are today. And probably the future mobility will behave the same. And then if you look at other industries, is really exactly the same behavior. And
well, the only difference that with the PC industry, it was not life and death. When you're dealing with the automotive industry, this is life and death. It's a difference.
I agree, but I think the industry, in technology industry, is much more mature today, and people are much more aware. And with life and death, there are safety rails that are happening. And for example, I had an early discussion with Hagai with regard to V2x, and he was talking about protocols that were written, I don't know, 5, 8, 10 years ago that he's using. So in some cases, the protocol are ahead of time. In some cases are not. But it's I think Tamir is right. Innovation is always a leading indicator. Uniformity is a trailing indicator. And with that, I would like to thank everybody. It was a fascinating session, and I'll send you a recording in the next few days, so you can send it to everybody that missed it, or if you want to review it. So with that, Omer, Hagai, Dani, and Tamir, thank you for your contribution, and for the listeners, thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.